We're going to talk about fear. And the title of this webinar is Fear Ruining Your Life? Now, that sounds kind of dramatic, but I want to talk about fear and how it can show up, because some of the ways that it shows up is very subtle. So first of all, let's talk about the definition. So fear, in the dictionary, it says it's anguish caused by a real or imaginary risk or harm. In other words, fear generates anxiety. Why? Well, because we don't know what's going to happen. And so when we typically don't know what's going to happen and don't have a clue, and sometimes things could go either way, that also stresses us out. Many times it creates so many unknowns, you're not able to move forward. So 5 different ways that fear will show up. It is basically based on your reactions. So let's look at these reactions. The first one is so obvious to see, but it's when you feel shock or like paralysis. And what I mean by that is typically when you've had a shock or fear is triggered, you kind of freeze. That's your first reaction, kind of like a deer in headlights, if you will. And in that moment, you're not able to think, you're not able to act. And then later on, you regret having not spoken up and said something. So you can also think about an animal. You know, we've all seen animals that when they get fear that their survival is at stake, you can see their reaction immediately. Okay, the next one is attack mode. So, and again, when you're in this mode, attacking, a lot of times you don't even realize that a fear has actually gotten triggered. So this will play out like in a form of aggression, if you will, maybe lashing out in hostility, attempting to shut down, destroy, or dominate the thing that's causing the fear. And if you see someone, and look at yourself as well, exploding with anger or compulsive communication, that's oftentimes fear. It's just being masked by that emotion, okay? What's behind it is that emotion. So that's the second reaction. Another reaction that indicates that, oh, you've gotten some fear triggered or you've run into some fear and you may not know it, is if you start postponing things or procrastination. I thought this was very interesting when I was studying this because I just kind of did a quick review of things in my own life that I've procrastinated handling or finishing. And behind that procrastination was areas of fear. You know, like maybe there's things that I need to go through, maybe discard, save, like records and just materials and things that I need to go through and get rid of, make a decision on. And there is fear behind that because I don't want to throw out something that might be useful in the future. So, yeah, if there's the areas of life where you've not been able to make a decision or you find yourself procrastinating, take a look what's behind that, if there's a fear. Many times, like delaying selling a business, selling a house, or learning to sell, or expanding the company, and you've not been able to do that, it's worth inspecting to see, ooh, is there some fear? You know, is there some fear around expanding that company, if you will, you know, and identify it. The fourth thing is, you know, we've all heard of fight or flight, right? Flight is just escaping, getting out of the situation. So if there's an area of fear that's present, okay, typically we want to escape. If you start feeling like you want to escape, get out of there, or taking a flight, just realize, okay, we're mentally checking out here, because that's what happens when you want to take a flight, when you want to flee, and you're checked out. So stop yourself and inspect that. Stay present with it versus withdrawing, and see, what are you afraid of? Sometimes the fears, a lot of times the fear is just imaginary, right? It's not real. And yes, sometimes, there are considerations to be inspected, because there are things you need to be aware of the decisions you're making. I'm not saying that. And then the fifth form of a reaction that shows up when fear is present is like total denying, pretending nothing happened, making total nothing of the situation, and just denying that nothing is wrong, nothing ever happened. It also it can come in a form of being in silent agreement with others and pretending that the fear is not there, versus speaking up and say, hey guys, we need to look at this. So those are the 5 common reactions that will let you know that there's some fear that is present. Now, let me give you an example of my biggest fear, and I've shared this before. My biggest fear, they often say public speaking is the number one fear, as much as dying, or if not more than dying. And I don't have a fear of dying, but the fear of public speaking was number one on my list. And so finally, I was able to confront it and see what was behind the fear. But when I was invited to speak on the first stage with Kim Kiyosaki, it was in Canada, and there was going to be about 200 to 300 women in this audience. I had so much fear, that I was just completely paralyzed. Okay, I couldn't think, I couldn't move, wasn't myself. I was just completely terrified. So I had to I knew that I was fearful of speaking. And when I'm on stage and when I'm doing a piece of the presentation, there's always I always give people the opportunity to come to the microphone and share, and they're welcome to ask questions. So the thing that I was fearful of was, and it took some doing for me to get to see what is really being triggered here. And that was being asked a question and not being able to answer them because I didn't know. So being asked a question that I couldn't answer and didn't have an answer to. And I'm not one to just try to BS my way through something. I don't like that. I don't do that. And so it would be very obvious to a crowd if I didn't know the answer. So that helped a lot, identifying that and kind of drilling it down and seeing that, oh, that's what I'm afraid of. So, but I kept looking behind that to see, well, what's behind that? What if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? How could I handle it? Well, it's just basically tell the person that I don't have the answer. And so what was behind all that was that I would look stupid. And that was the real fear behind being asked a question that I couldn't answer, that I would look stupid. And that obviously goes back to some incidents, if you will, in school, looking stupid, feeling stupid. Typically, nobody does not like to feel stupid or be thought of as stupid. So once I saw that, it was such a relief, because I also looked at, well, how could I handle that if I was on stage and asked a question that I had no knowledge in, or I couldn't answer and I was uncertain? Well, I just would be honest, and I would tell the person that I don't have the answer, but I'm sitting right over there. And when we take a break, come over to my table. And if I don't have the answer for you at that time, then we'll exchange phone numbers, And when I get back to the ranch in Texas, I'll call you and we'll talk about it. It's that simple. People appreciate honesty, and they also can see when you're BSing and you really don't know what you're talking about. So, with that, here's a little exercise you can do to see if there's some fears that you're overlooking that's preventing you from seeing opportunities, ways that you can grow. So make a list of your fears, and you don't have to share this with anyone, okay? Write them down. Be honest. For example, if you're not selling, take a look and see, what are you afraid of? If you're not selling, what are you afraid of? If you're not booking appointments, what are you afraid of? And then if your income and your relationships are not where you want them to be, take a look and see, okay, so what's the fear behind that? What is the fear behind that? The other thing around this is by just doing this exercise, looking at your fears, acknowledging them, and being honest about it is very, very liberating. Then you can do something about it. I hope you have an excellent day writing down your fears and inspecting them and seeing what's behind it, kind of like I did around public speaking when I saw what I was really, really afraid of and then how I handle it. Very, very liberating. I hope you're able to move forward, and feel free to post a comment and let me know, what did you find out when you did this exercise? See you next week.